Welcome back to Life on Books. I'm your host, Tony.
And I'm Andy.
And he's Andy, a.k.a. Metafictional Meathead, and Anthony on Life. So, we just did an episode about our top 5 favorite books, and now we are segueing into, what do we say we're doing now?
Underrated, underappreciated. You're going to talk about overrated books,
Yes.
And I'm going to piggyback off of you because I didn't come prepared for that. And then if we have time, we'll cover some books we think are must-read.
Perfect. Okay, so let's start with your number one most underrated book. Let's get right into it.
Okay. I sort of struggled a little bit with this one. I feel like there are some of the books that I, have read and really enjoyed, I don't think are as like lesser known. So I tried to pick some that maybe aren't as by authors that are well known that maybe aren't talked about as much out of their work, or just maybe authors that I don't hear about as much because they get kind of overshadowed by some of their contemporaries, no matter how respected they are. So I'll start with my first. These are, again, in no particular order. I'll start with Omensetter's Luck by William H. Gass. It was actually his debut novel. Kind of a crazy story. He wrote the novel while he was working as a professor. I don't remember which college he was working at the time, somewhere in the Midwest. And he had the manuscript pretty much like written out, almost done. And one of his fellow professors stole it.
Oh, wow.
Him. Yeah.
That's insane.
Yeah. I don't remember if that's just alleged or how proven it was.
Sure.
I know that I don't remember the entire story, but like him and this guy did not like get along, but he, had the manuscript on his desk, left it there and went to go teach a class. And when he came back, it was gone. And he tried to like follow this guy's career and see if any of it like ever got published or anything like that.
Interesting.
And this was, I don't remember the exact date year it was published, but it was, pre hard drives and computers, and it was probably done on like a typewriter or something like that. So it was pretty much had to start like from scratch.
Yeah.
But I don't know if it's fair to call it underrated, but I think just because of Gass's work, and I think Omensetter's Luck typically gets overshadowed by The Tunnel, which is like his, magnum opus.
Sure.
I think a lot of people that are in the know enough to know who William Gaddis is probably would think of The Tunnel first.
Sorry, William Gass, right?
Yeah, Gass.
Yes.
Gass. Yes.
Not Gaddis.
No, another Midwestern. They wrote at the same time. They often got confused.
Sure.
But yeah, I think it just gets a little bit overshadowed by The Tunnel. But it's a great book. It's his work in general is kind of challenging, but I think Omensetter's Luck is a little bit more accessible. So
That reminds me
starting
of
place.
a friend of mine attended Keene State College here in New Hampshire and studied, did their film program. And he claims that I think like Mel Gibson came to the school to like, I don't know. I don't remember the context of his visit, but basically there were some people in one of his classes that had written a screenplay, and he stole it from them. And it became that movie where he can hear the thoughts of women.
Oh,
Yeah. And which was a wildly successful film. I forget. It might be What Women Want or something like that. But my friend claims that his classmates wrote that screenplay and he stole it.
wow.
Yeah.
It's like there's someone out there that claims Matt Damon and Ben Affleck stole Good Will Hunting from them.
Yeah.
Or they were like involved in the process and then they cut him out or something like that.
Quentin Tarantino got sued for Django Unchained. Supposedly he stole that from a father-son writing duo.
Oh, wow.
I don't know what the outcome of that lawsuit was, but it happens.
Well, at least in the case of William Gass, the guy that stole this work was not successful, like publishing it under his name or anything like
Good.
that.
That guy.
Yeah.
So on my first underrated list, this was a tough one for me because I would say like, and you're probably in the same boat, like anything I read is probably going to be able to go on this list because you and I read some things that aren't really that popular.
Yeah.
But I tried to think of things that were kind of in the public conscious, but weren't necessarily appreciated as much. And the first thing that came to mind was actually Jurassic Park by Michael Crichton. Obviously, hugely successful film.
Right.
I think Crichton, as a writer, is probably well rated. Like in general, I think people think he was a good writer, but that is the only book I've read by him that he's written, and I was just really impressed by it. The writing was good. The movie is probably one of my favorites, so it was like a big mountain for that book to climb, and I put it on par with the movie, and in some ways was better than the movie, which I think is hard to do when you're talking about dinosaurs.
Right.
Right? Like, in general, books are better than movies when you look at adaptations.
Yes.
But, to put real lifelike looking dinosaurs on screen, it's hard to beat that with paper and writing. But it has a much different vibe from the movie. There's a little bit more of a horror element.
Okay.
And obviously with a book, you're able to dive deeper into certain themes, one of which is that disaster capitalism.
Yeah.
In the film, the guy that built the park, the frick is his name? Anyway, he's kind of like shown to you as this like fun-loving grandpa, Santa Claus type figure, but in the book, he's a legit villain.
Okay.
And it's just a really cool book. I think that despite how popular Jurassic Park as a franchise is, probably a lot of people have not read the book and would really enjoy it. So, yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I think where I kind of struggled with my list, you sort of alluded to this. I think, well, in general, a lot of, the general public, maybe people that read more mainstream books, not that that's a bad thing, but wouldn't know of a lot of the books that we've talked about today, or maybe just heard of them in passing or whatever. I think where I kind of struggled with it is, as I was like thinking in terms of the little Instagram echo chamber I've built around myself, and like most of the people that will listen to this when I share it, hopefully will listen to this when I share it, like have heard of these books.
Sure.
And have heard of most of the books that I've read. So I was trying to like,
Or have read them themselves.
right. I was just like, that's where I was struggling to like think of like, what should I talk about? Because I think, a lot of people have heard of them, but I try to pick ones that, haven't gotten as much attention or anything like that. So
what's next on your list then?
next on my list, I will go with one that I read earlier this year that was really good and really enjoyed. It is Sombrero Fallout by Richard Brodigan.
Never heard of it.
Brodigan's kind of getting some shine on the Bookstagram lately, at least in the corners I operate in. He was kind of the Beat generation. He's got a weird, quirky style. It's, I don't want to like downplay it by saying it's simple, but it's not like very complex writing. So there's kind of fun, goofy stories. He kind of like parodies different genres, things like that. But his novel, Sombrero Fallout, a Japanese novel, is actually the full title. I have not seen talked about a lot among the works of his that's getting shared.
What's like his most popular book?
I think his most popular in the grand scheme of things is probably Trout Fishing in America or Watermelon Sugar. Those are two I think he's most well known for.
Did he write that? Was he inspired by Watermelon Sugar High? By
He was not.
Okay.
No, there's a significant period of time between the two.
When what year did this novel come out? The one that you said's underrated?
Let's look.
The Sombrero.
Yeah. Let me look it up.
Come on, you should know these things off the top of
I
your head.
should, man. I don't know. 1975. Excuse me, 76. 76.
Which I would say like that that post World War II, pre 9/11 era seems to be your sweet spot.
I think so. Probably. Even a little bit like post 9/11.
What year did Infinite Jest come out?
95, 96?
Yeah.
Something like that.
Then that book has a very 90s vibe to it.
Yes.
And David Foster Wallace, like my kind of vision of him in my brain is very 90s. So, and what was what was it called? Something sombrero?
Sombrero Fallout.
Sombrero
It's
Fallout.
right over there.
Oh, right. And you came prepared with all those books.
I did. It's a nice backdrop. It's a very funny book. So it's kind of got two parallel narratives going on in it. And one thing that's really cool about Brodigan, if you're looking for something that's like a little bit easier to read or anything like that, I think the longest chapter I've read a handful of his books. I think the longest chapter in any of them has been like 6-7 pages.
Okay. I can get down with that.
Yeah. Some of them are like a page, 2 pages, whatever.
Yeah. I actually enjoy that.
But so they read pretty quickly. And they're usually like 200-ish pages at the most. But anyway, this one, it follows a writer who is unnamed. He's referred to as the American humorist. And he's a writer. And it starts off with him like trying to start a new novel or body of work or whatever. And he doesn't really like what he's working with, what he's come up with. So he tears the page out of his notebook, tosses it up, and throws it in the trash. And as he's dealing with the fallout of a relationship ending with a significant other of his, within the trash can on that piece of paper, the novel is kind of taking place.
Interesting.
So it's just kind of, it's just carrying on from where he started.
That's cool.
So it kind of bounces, and it's just totally ridiculous story. Sombrero Fallout, it starts, it's in this like tiny western town, and a sombrero falls out of the sky and just lands on like Main Street.
Which I think is similar to the latest Keegan-Michael Key or Jordan Peele rather.
Oh,
film.
really?
Well, I don't want to spoil it for anybody, but what's the name of that movie though? The Alien one. Oh God,
I don't know, dude.
I didn't like it, but it was so popular last year.
He did Get Out. Was it We or Us? Or?
It was Us. But
Us.
Well, after that.
Okay. Was it the one he did on HBO? The show?
No.
Okay. Was that him? No, that was somebody else.
Nope.
You
should be able to remember this one freaking word. So that reminds me of Nope by Jordan Peele. Yeah.
But, so it kind of bounces back and forth between, what's happening with these made up characters basically on a piece of paper in his trash can and, the fallout of his breakup. So.
Interesting.
Hago, what's your favorite book? Grapes of Wrath, huh? It's a good choice.
Yeah. Who would you recommend the book for?
I think anybody that kind of likes funny, easy to read books, something simple, quirky narratives. I will say, they kind of split. So the one of the characters in the novel, that's a very funny, absurd tale. And then the humorist kind of going through his breakup, that's a very heartfelt, kind of, I don't want to say tragic, but tragedy-ish kind of story. So
cool.
I think it would appeal to a lot of people.
Cool. Next on my list is a book that definitely no one's ever heard of. I've talked about it a little bit here and there on social media, but it's A Far Better Rest by Susan Allen. I believe it's the only novel she ever wrote. It's a retelling of A Tale of Two Cities from Sidney Carton's perspective. And so it's not at all like Dickens' writing. It's much more approachable, much more modern. But I love A Tale of Two Cities. It's probably my favorite Dickens. But it also kind of doesn't make sense. There's a big gap in Sidney Carton's kind of story in the book. And so it made sense to like plug in or imagine the details of that.
Interesting.
And I thought it became a nice like complement to the original text. So I don't know if you'd call that like fan fiction. I don't know. What qualifies as fan fiction?
I think that's probably borderline.
Yeah. But it's well written. It doesn't read in an amateurish way. I don't believe it was self-published. I don't even remember how I came across it. I think I read about it in another book. Someone
Interesting.
mentioned it in another book, and I was like, "What the hell is that?" And I think I had just read A Tale of Two Cities, and I was like, "Oh, well, I guess I'd check this out." And I thought it was great. So, if anyone, I think it's a great book for people who maybe romanticize the idea of the reading Dickens because they're so popular and they're classics, and they're interesting stories, but maybe don't care for his writing style or have a hard time getting through it. It might be a cool way to access that storyline, and maybe participate in some of the conversations happening around Dickens without maybe needing to actually read it. So, or for me, like I thought that it gave some closure to the story. So maybe if you felt like, man, Sidney Carton, like, what happened to that dude? Might be a good option.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Cool.
So what do you got next?
I will go with next The Lime Twig by John Hawkes, which is a really good one. Hawkes is kind of from the same, from what I've read, I think he was kind of contemporary with like Pynchon, Gaddis, Gass, Robert Coover, who will probably come up a little bit later in our discussion. Just kind of those like 60s, 70s, 80s, postmodern-ish guys.
Neo-Marxists.
And I think I've certainly, heard about him or seen his name come up in enough discussions. I think possibly because his books are a little bit shorter, and maybe more accessible. He kind of gets overshadowed by some of the other authors that he gets roped in with. But he's a very interesting writer. It's a great book. It's kind of got that like darkly comic, creepy crawly vibe to it.
Cool.
It's about this couple that tries to, they buy a horse and they try to like fix a horse race. And
Another classic tale.
yeah, and the type of people that, they're not the type of people that, fix horse races. They just think they can get in on the scam.
Sure.
And they encounter the type of people that fix horse races, and it, doesn't go well for them. So
Awesome.
yeah, you could bang it out in like a weekend or so.
All right.
What's up next for you?
So next on my list, I should actually reference this because I don't have the book sitting here. So Henry Cartier-Bresson, Conversations. And so anyone listening probably has no idea who that is. He was a very famous journalist and photographer, mostly a photographer. Photographed during probably from like the late 40s, early 50s, up through his entire life. He passed away at maybe in like 2003. Really pioneered what we now consider street photography, which is kind of like where you just walk around where there's people and you photograph what's going on. And so it's not posed photography. It's not portraits. It's not candid. It's literally like documentarian style. And he's got some very famous photos that people, even if you don't recognize his name, you'll probably see the photo and be like, oh, yeah, I've seen that. And what I love about the book is it's a collection of interviews with him throughout his life. And he's just a very interesting guy. And people love to over-intellectualize his work. And what his most famous book of photography is called The Decisive Moment. And so there's people who have written books about this. You can go on YouTube and watch tons of videos on what the decisive moment in photography is. And people talk about like being patient and waiting for the decisive moment. And in the book, he's like, yeah, I didn't even come up with that phrase. Like that was like my publisher's idea. Like I don't give a shit about that. Like he's just such a real guy. He's so down to earth. He keeps it simple. He pretty much shot on black and white film with a 50 millimeter lens. He didn't get crazy with it. And he's just very smart. He's very, I would say, progressive in his thinking politically, which motivated a lot of his photography. I think even if you don't know anything about photography, people would still find the interviews very interesting because he was just such a worldly person, and also, I mean, he was getting sent on assignments to photograph war and riots and, you know, really politically significant events. So, and he was involved with Magnum Photography, which is like one of the oldest, like, I guess you could call it a publication for lack of a better term, but it's like a cohort of professional photographers that,
Gotcha.
you know, do journalistic photography.
Very cool. What was the title of the book again?
It's just called like Henry Cartier-Bresson Conversations and Interviews.
Oh,
Yeah, it's like maybe $10 on Amazon or $8 on Amazon. Pretty short book. You could read it in a weekend, like you said, with the other one. So, yeah, if you're at all interested in photography, give that a look at for sure, or just, you know, someone that was a impactful artist, I guess.
interesting.
Yeah.
All right. For my last pick for underrated, or no, excuse me, this is number 4.
Yeah.
I went with Watchmen by Alan Moore.
It's a graphic novel, right?
Yes, and I think that's probably why it is. It's a very well respected book. You know, again, another book that underrated, right, might not be the best descriptor for, but maybe a little undershadowed or overshadowed. Excuse me. You know, it doesn't get as much shine because it is a graphic novel, but it's a really interesting book.
I find that people don't. It's kind of a hard line.
Yeah.
I either read graphic novels or I don't. You know what I mean? I don't find there's a lot of people that are like, oh, I'm going to pick up a graphic novel today, and I read, you know, an 800-page novel the day before.
Yeah, I've read, after reading, I recently read V for Vendetta, which is another one of his graphic novels. And
both great movies, by the way.
yes, actually, I haven't seen the Watchmen movie. I've seen the HBO limited series, which was really good. I think that's what finally drew me in towards getting my hands on the book. But I don't know how much it's inspired me to search out like other graphic novels. I do kind of want to look into more of his work. He did one, again, another one they made a movie about or based on From Hell. It's about Jack the Ripper.
Yeah.
Which it seems like it was really, really interesting. And, you know, Watchmen, I want to say my edition is 400 something pages. V for Vendetta, is only 200 something. I think From Hell is a little bit longer. I think it's in the like 500 to 600 range. So I want to check that out and see what, you know, a longer form graphic novel is like. But I think it's a really compelling narrative. I think the characters within are really well done. Dialogue is great. And, you know, it has a little bit of that like kind of campy superhero stuff here and there, but it also is kind of a parody of the genre. So it's to be expected. And then Dave Gibbons, who did the illustrations, the artwork in there is really great as well. So
yeah, I think I find that with the mediums like that, it's interesting because you have to like both facets. You have to like the writing and the graphics, obviously.
Yeah.
Same thing with audiobooks. I put out a video this week about that. It's like there's lots of audiobooks out there where I know I would enjoy the actual book, but the narration sucks.
Yeah.
You know, or in the case of the video I made, I found a narrator that I could listen to him talk about. He could freaking read the ABCs, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
I think one of the things I really liked about it too is, you know, I don't want to say it's an easy book, but compared to some of the other books we've talked about and will talk about, it's a lot more accessible. And, you know, I don't want to diminish the graphic novel genre, but, you know, it is basically a novelized comic book.
right.
And it was easier to follow along with, you know, if I wanted to do some reading at the end of a long day or, you know, whatever. I woke up in the middle of the night and wanted to get a few pages in to try to get back to sleep. You know, it's certainly something you could do with a little bit less brain power, you know, if you're running on fumes, but wanted to get some pages in.
Yeah, I want to like them. I just can't get into it. I can't. I have two issues with graphic novels. First, I find it difficult to get into a rhythm because I think looking at the images like breaks up the actual reading part of it for me. And also, so much of the enjoyment that I get out of reading is like the visualization in my own head
Yeah.
And obviously that's taking that away from you to a degree.
Yeah.
When you have the images done out for you. And I think that's probably why a lot of people like books more than the movie adaptation, right? Because you imagine these characters or these places to be much different, and then this kind of a disappointment when you see the director's interpretation of it or whatever.
Yeah.
But hey,
well, if you're trying to get into one, I know just the place to start.
apparently The Watchmen. I'll give it a go.
Yeah.
I'll take a look
I
at
think
it.
you would like it.
Okay, so next on my list for underrated books is Tinkers by Paul Harding. So we talked earlier or in the last episode about books that while you're reading them, you're like, yeah, this is pretty good. But then after the fact, you're like, oh, there's something about that was very sticky and sticks in my brain. And so Tinkers by Paul Harding for me is one of those books. It came out in 2012 or 2013. I picked it up because he's a New England author and just looked interesting. And excellent writer. I think is starting to get very appreciated in literary fiction. He's got a few works out now, but still doesn't really get talked about enough. But one of my favorite quotes of all time, or passages, if you will, is from that book. So I can't say, I think I originally rated it like a 3 or 4 on, Goodreads or whatever when I first read it. And then later on I went back and I was like, no, this was better than I thought it was.
You know what's, you say that, when I first read Gravity's Rainbow, I had not gotten anything into Bookstagram. I didn't even really know that was a space. And it was definitely before I had an appreciation for harder books. I went back and I saw like randomly, I think it was like my Instagram memories. I said it was a 7.8 out of 10. And now it's like, the more I think it's just like, I just didn't appreciate the density of it at the time. And now I'm like, what the hell is wrong with you?
And I don't think it's like romanticizing your memory of it. I think it's literally like the book, you can't appreciate how impactful it was until you've had some space and you're like, oh, I'm still thinking about this book.
Yeah.
So
I think it's also one of those things like you have to read the right book at the right time. I'm sure there are books that I read, years ago that at the time really resonated with me and I really enjoyed it. And I might pick up now and be like, I'm not into this. I don't care.
Yeah.
So,
all right. What's your final underrated book?
I'm going to go over and grab it because it's just a cool little book.
Is that small one on top?
It is. So for my final underrated pick,
Here, I'll hold it.
what I think more people should read is Unidentified Man at Left of Photo by Jeff Bursey. I don't know if you can tell from you holding it up, compare it next to Warlock. They are
quite a bit different in size.
Yeah, the size is very different. This is another one from Corona Sama's Dot. They're pocket books. You could literally fit this in your back pocket.
Love it.
But it is it's about a group of people on Prince Edward Island in Canada. It's Canada's smallest province. And they're just kind of going about their life. And it's very playful and experimental. Bursey kind of goofs around with what you can do with the novel. And, kind of has those like postmodern metafictional hijinks that I'm really into.
How many phallic jokes are in there?
I'm sure there's some in there. One of my favorite, let me see if there is there a table of contents? There is. Okay. You'll appreciate this because it does have the table of contents.
Oh, very nice.
There's 2 chapters in here. Where is it? Okay. So one of the ones in here that I think about pretty frequently, I can't find it. Anyway, it's in there twice. The title of the chapter is "Trouble in the Hen House," and you'll see like for the different ones. So there's this title of the chapter right there at the top. "Trouble in the Hen House." It's just a blank page, and like later in the again "Trouble in the Hen House," it's just another blank page,
Nice.
and like every now and then, like I'll just be sitting there at work or reading a different book or something, and I'll like think about that and just get that like little chuckle. Like that was a funny one you did there. But it just he just kind of plays with what you can do with a novel and the approach to writing. And some of it, he's kind of got those like authorly asides or things like that. And then other times it'll be like, instead of describing a character, it'll be like, picture that person from work you don't like.
Right.
And then, you can, like you were kind of saying earlier, like you like to imagine and fill in the blanks yourself. Like it's right. He's not just like describing someone and telling you what this person should look like. He's like saying, okay, you fill in the blank. Like you take a guess what this character
That's awesome.
should look like. And we'll run with it from there.
I love that.
It's a really fun one. Pretty short. I think I read it in I think Emily was out of town and I didn't have anything to do. So I read it in like one sitting, but
nice.
It's another one you could knock out in a weekend and that's a lot of fun. So
cool.
Check it out.
The last book on my list is Between the World and Me by Ta-Nehisi Coates. Great book about, basically it's written as like a letter to his son about what it's going to be like to grow up as a black man in America. Mm-hmm. And just great writing, great storytelling, obviously culturally important. And in my opinion, just doesn't get talked about enough. He doesn't get talked about enough as a contemporary writer. I mean, apparently, to say that black people have suffered oppressions is like makes you political or controversial these days. But I don't really have a ton to say about it. I mean, people know about that book, but I think people should read it because it's just really good.
All right. There we go.
All right. So that is our underrated list. We're half hour in. So what are we doing next?
Do you want to do some overrated? I didn't come prepared with any.
Man, yes. Let's do overrated. I love talking shit.
I know you do. You are a hater if there ever was one.
Absolutely.
So let's hear it. What do you hate? What did you...
I want to apologize to our good friend Becca, who gifted me this book.
Oh, boy.
When she was a little bit younger, maybe 18.
Okay.
And at the time was her favorite book. Her and I have discussed this a little bit since then, and she kind of...
oh, boy. I know where you're going.
Yeah, I don't think she said she hates the book, but she maybe realizes, like, maybe not as impactful as for someone at my stage of life, which is being old. But that is The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho. The writing's okay. The message is fine. I think what was the point of that book? Like, make of life what it is. Like,
once you find your calling.
Yeah, appreciate the things around you. You don't need to go searching for it. But I just see like I'm a big Reddit guy, so I'm on all the Reddit book related subreddits, and a lot of times people on r suggest me a book will ask like, I'm going through a tough time, like what's a good book? And people will be like, you have to read The Alchemist, it saved my life. And I'm like, what fucking book did you read? Like, I understand how a young person could read that, and especially when you're maybe thinking about going to college and there's all this pressure put on you and you think that like this is going to be a life-changing decision whether I choose college A or college B, and I get it from that lens, but like just as a maybe mid-20s or older, I'm like, what? How is this book saving your life?
I think I've actually read it twice.
Why would you subject yourself to that?
Because I was young and dumb both times. The first time, I think I was in that, like, I don't know, probably 18 to 20 age, somewhere in there. And I remember, like, most 18 to 20-year-olds that don't really have a sense of what the world is like being like, this is it, man. I got it. I got the secret now.
Yeah. I had to, like, legit look up what the point of the book was.
And then
I was just like, this is not resonating with me.
And then, I read it a second time. Actually, it was the first summer that I moved up here, just temporarily.
Gotcha,
I was here doing that internship. And I enjoyed it. I don't think it was nearly as impactful. I think there was still some like, it resonated a little bit. And then now I look back, I'm like, what the hell was I thinking? Like I've not even a ton of life experience, but I've had enough to be like, this is so surface level. There's really not a ton of substance. It's just not a lot of, there's like you said, like what's the point? What's the message there?
Yeah. So that's my probably top pick. What do you have anything you want to add to some picks of yours? Overrated?
Well, it's funny. I will mention one because I sent you a message about this. I will probably get some flack from some of my followers on Bookstagram for this one, but it's Stoner by John Williams. I've seen a lot of, I know a lot of people who have, shared a lot of love for this book, who really love this book. I've had multiple people when I have told them that I didn't like it, have responded back, like, you're the first person that said that to me, like, yada, yada. I think, so it's about the main characters, his name is John Stoner, I think. And Stoner is his last name. He grows up on a farm.
Is he Australian?
No.
Okay.
Boring Midwestern. He grows up on a farm, goes away to college. When he's at college, he starts taking, I think his parents sent him there to take some sort of like agricultural type thing so he can come home and help the farm. And he ends up taking some English classes and falling in love with literature and yada, yada, yada. And I think that's what draws a lot of people in. It's, that kind of campus novel people tend to love. And even more so when it's, someone falling in love with literature. I think that gets very romanticized. And to me, like, the writing was fine. I didn't think it was poorly written, but I thought it was just kind of this boring book about this guy who goes away and really likes English classes and really likes literature. And then he can't ever really like make a decision. He just kind of like lets life happen to him. And not to like criticize people that are like that. I've certainly had moments like that where like I just kind of let life happen to me. But as a narrative, as a book, I was just like, this is not very exciting. Like it's just, it was fine.
Yeah.
I don't think it was a bad book. I think it had some redeeming qualities to it. I'm sure, I think the people that like it, they probably have liked it for good reasons. But to me, it was just fine. So
that actually reminds me of a book that I think is overrated that I did not put on my list, which is The Sun Also Rises by Hemingway. I often say that after I read that book, I was shocked that the guy had a writing career. I thought it was that bad.
I think I remember feeling pretty similar. I didn't really have much appreciation for literature at all when I read it. I think I was just like a kid in college. I was like, I'm going to read Hemingway and be,
The way I describe it to people is it's like 1920s Seinfeld without the comedy.
That's a perfect description for it.
Seinfeld, the joke was it's a show about nothing. And it's just these friends that kind of like derp around, and kind of listless and don't have much direction in life and are kind of repeating the same mistakes over and over. And that is literally A Sun Also Rises, kind of almost down to like the friend group where you know what I mean? Like there's that one woman with like three guys, and they're all friends, and like the guys kind of have romantic feelings for her, but it's complicated.
Right.
And so, obviously Hemingway did not rip off Seinfeld since it came much earlier, but people are like, oh, well, it's about the listlessness of the generation, following World War I. It's like, okay, but do you know how like small of a time that was?
It doesn't make it a good book.
It doesn't make it a good book. It was such a small period in history, and it applied to such a specific group of people,
right?
That it just, I guess I could understand how when it came out in the late 20s, early 30s, or whenever it was published, I can get why people would it would resonate with people then. But now I'm like, this is just, there's no real reason to read it. There's some interesting play about the main character and his disability, if you will.
Yeah.
His inability to perform certain acts that make it kind of interesting, but it's just not enough to sustain it. I thought it was incredibly boring. And I like Hemingway in general. I think A Farewell to Arms is great. But The Sun Also Rises way overrated for me because I know people that's their favorite Hemingway book, and I'm like, have you read the other ones? Like, what? So, anything else come to mind for you?
I've got a couple. One of them is Duck's Newburyport, which I've talked about at length and other podcasts we've done. I just,
that is a brick of a book. We were recently at Gibson's in Concord, New Hampshire for their annual 25% off sale, and that was sitting on the shelf, and I grabbed it, and it's just
yeah, it's heavy, man. It's several pounds. It's a commitment. I think people just kind of laud it because it's this, ambitious. There's that word again.
My least favorite word in describing a book or a writer.
It certainly is ambitious, and I think that's what leads to a lot of the praise, but I thought it was stupid.
Yeah, fair enough.
And then the only one that comes to mind as overrated, and again, I don't mean that it was a bad book. I just think
something can be overrated and still be good.
Yes.
It's just overhyped, basically.
Right. For me, it was Confederacy of Dunces.
Oh, interesting.
By John Kennedy Toole. It was a good book. I enjoyed it enough.
I believe ChatGPT actually put that on like a must-read list I made for the last 100 years.
Yeah, you can probably skip it. I think part of it, I alluded to this in our last episode. After I read Abundant Circuity, like everything fell flat for me. Confederacy of Dunces was one of those books. I'm sure there was maybe some bigger themes that I missed and I just didn't get the point. But
yeah,
I also thought the main character was kind of an ass and just insufferable and just kind of derping around New Orleans. And, some of the hijinks he found himself in were funny, but I think if you look it up or you follow enough people on Instagram, you'll see it, praised as this must-read book, and I don't think it is. It's not a bad book. And maybe at a different time I would have enjoyed it more. And I don't want to discourage anyone from reading it. If they're interested in it, check it out. It wasn't for me, and it didn't really live up to the hype.
Cool. Yeah.
So,
all right, there you go. Overrated, but also have on my list. This is going to be controversial. I'm going to say the Bible. And the reason why I want to bring this up is when people ask in good faith, no pun intended, what's a book that changed your life? And people say the Bible. It's that's such a bullshit answer. It's yes, I understand your religious text is very important to you, and that's fine. But that's clearly not what the person is asking.
Yeah.
Everyone knows the Bible exists. Everyone knows the Quran exists. We don't need you to tell us that it's, this impactful work.
Right.
Yes.
Plus, it wasn't just I'm going to assume, painting with broad strokes here, but it wasn't just the book that was impactful.
Correct.
Correct. And I don't mean to harp on anyone that has a very religious background.
Sure.
Whether they are or aren't anymore. But I don't think I didn't grow up going to church. So if I sat down and read the Bible, it probably wouldn't resonate with me. We didn't read our Bible verses at dinner.
Right.
We said grace on holidays, depending which family was over. But that was pretty much it.
Right.
For someone that grew up religious and went to church and had a religious family and things like that, obviously that's going to be an important, impactful book. But there's so much more context to that than just the book.
And what's interesting too is there's this guy on TikTok, Dan McClellan, who's a PhD of religious studies, focusing on, the Bible. And he basically just responds to other creators that have made claims and using the Bible as their justification for their beliefs. Mm-hmm. And even though he is, I believe he's Mormon of all things, he's yeah, that's fake, or what you're saying only appeared in this one specific version of the Bible that came out in this period, and that's actually influenced from this event happening. It's not really part of the original text, or this is a well-known mistranslation, and so it's again, if you participate in some organized religion, totally cool. Respect your right to do so. We'll defend your right to do so. However, Like, just when people are asking for book recommendations, just like fuck off with that shit.
Yeah. I think my favorite thing ever is people that have Bible verses quote, whether it's the verse himself or just like the name of the verse tattooed on themselves.
Yeah.
And I don't mean to like poke fun at them, but if you have a Bible tattoo and you're a deeply religious person, did you skip Leviticus? Because it specifically says don't get tattoos.
Nice.
Like,
yeah.
I think you missed a chapter.
That's a topic for another day, perhaps.
I just it popped into my head, and I think it just makes me laugh.
Yeah. And I had one more on my overrated list, but I don't know that I wrote it down. Let me see if I did. No, I don't have it. What was it? Oh, this is another one I'm going to get super flamed for.
Oh boy.
Dostoyevsky in general. I appreciate his place in the world of literature. I understand why people like it. I just like, we'll use Crime and Punishment as a great example. It's like, dude, I just don't need to read a novel about this to know that, like, if I killed someone, it would probably weigh on my conscience. You know what I mean? Like, people are like, oh, he just understood, like, the human condition and psyche and all this stuff, and, questions all this morality. And I'm like, does it, though? Like, again, maybe in 19th century Russia or Soviet Union or whatever, sure. But, the Soviet Union wasn't really a thing then. But, it's just, I don't know, man. It's just not for me.
I sort of feel that way about the brothers Karamazov, but I loved Crime and Punishment, so I can't totally jump on the train. But I will I sort of feel that way about the classics in general a little bit, and we can use this kind of as a segue into our must reads if we have time to get to it. But
yeah, definitely.
I think with a lot of the classics in general, because they're the classics, people feel like they have to read them or things like that. And it's like, like you said, like a lot of times they were impactful because they were, the time they were written in. And
I can appreciate that. Like, I feel the same way about music, which I often use as a comparative tool on this podcast. Like, if you listen to the Beatles now, it might not blow your mind if you're a young person that's heard more recent music that's more technical,
right,
or people have better voices, or the production's better. But when you put it in the context of like, these guys thought of these songs literally before anyone did anything like this, you're like, whoa, that's cool. And right. I do feel the same way about writing. But
I think on one hand, like, they have withstood the test of time for a reason.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, like, just because it's a book from 200 years ago that people still talk about and appreciate and whatever, doesn't mean you have to read it. Doesn't mean you have to like it. I think, things I was thinking about when we were kind of making these lists, things like that, like, when I've talked about it before, like after I read Gravity's Rainbow, I kind of wanted to do all this research into what it was about, what it covered, other similar authors, things like that. And I kind of felt like I had to go on this quest, this mission to like read everything that inspired or was referenced in some way to Gravity's Rainbow.
Yeah.
Which is impossible.
Right.
For a normal person with a day job.
Right.
And have felt that way about other books and other authors as well. Like, I want to like understand what goes into what influences an author. And I want to have, like, if I know that, so a lot of people have made some parallels to Infinite Jest and the brothers Karamazov. They both
really?
have three brothers as the kind of central family unit. And there are, philosophical ideas that are kind of tied in there. And, you can make that comparison, leave it at that, and just go on and read it. And I think, but at the end of the day, like, I really wanted to read it. I want to read Infinite Jest. I'm going to read Infinite Jest. I don't want to like, okay, I have to read this 700 page book first, and then I have to, and then before you know it, like you have this stack of books that you have to read before you get to the book that you want to read.
Right.
Just read the book. And
So we kind of talked about this with Krista with the unreleased episode that no one will ever hear since the audio file got corrupted. But you had asked her some type of question like how to get more out of reading. And I think she had said like, well, there's a lot of allusions in a lot of literature that go back to the Bible.
yeah.
And I don't disagree with her, but my kind of counter argument to that is the idea that's put out there with the Bible is that these are kind of universal truths because they're godly.
Yeah.
It's like, well, if that's true, then I don't need to read the original text because the new modern allusion will still accomplish that. You know what I mean? Like if it's alluding to a universal truth,
Yeah.
it'll land with me either way.
Right.
So
I think something that crossed my mind as I was just ranting there a little bit. So Rick Harsh, who is the chief editor and founder of Coronis Amistad, who I've talked about a little bit today.
Very interesting guy.
He's a very interesting guy.
Friend of mine on Instagram.
Yeah, follow him on YouTube. He's a character for sure. He's also written quite a few novels himself. And on top of being a writer and an editor, he is a prolific reader. Mm-hmm. And he's got some pretty interesting videos on his YouTube talking about, just kind of rambling about books he's read, and he's done similar like top lists or whatever. And I think it was one where he was just kind of going through his apartment, like just kind of picking up books and whatever. And he was talking about someone had sent him a message. He was talking about one book that I don't remember what it was, but he really enjoyed or whatever. And it's something he had talked about before. And he said somebody had like sent him a message and been like, oh, I just read this book that you blah, blah, blah. I can't wait to read more of your work now and see how it's influenced you. And he was like, fuck you, just read my books. Like, don't, this book was important to me, but now you're like putting my work in a box.
Right.
Like, okay, I have to look for allusions to this book because Rick said he really liked it. And like, I have to try to like pick things out of his personal writing style and that, it's from this book. Like, no, like this is a work of art that I created.
Right. That's funny.
And it's not to like discredit the influence of previous works, but it kind of, it put it in a new light because it if you think about it, it sort of does discredit the current work of art.
Yeah.
Because you're just like instantly comparing it to something else.
Right. People do that a lot with East of Eden in the Bible, which I understand that it's
kind of hard not to.
Right. But it's like, well, honestly, I've read a lot of the Bible because I went to Catholic school. I liked East of Eden a lot more. So
fair enough. As did I. I think I kind of talked about that in this, the episode with Krista, but like I had to read the Bible for that summer reading period as well. That I also read East of Eden. I didn't read the Bible because I was a snot-nosed teenager and I didn't read the Bible as an English assignment. I think if your goal is to study these deeper texts and really try to get more out of them, like if you want to like really process these allusions and what the writer was trying to say and all that good stuff, it might behoove you to read up on more on just like, oh, he was alluding to this passage and move on. Like you should read up on that passage, things like that. But if you're just a casual reader and like a hobbyist, if you see something that kind of pops up, Google it, read about it, move on.
So speaking of moving on, should we hit the must reads here?
Let's do it.
Okay. What's number one on your list?
Crime and Punishment.
Seriously?
I put it on my list.
God damn it.
I don't know if I have like a hard, I have a few, but
all right,
like,
justify it to me. Why is it a must read?
This is going to go against everything I just said, but like,
I love that.
I think it was this foundational text. I do think it really says a lot about human suffering, the human condition. I do think it was a really well written book. It's one of the few quote unquote classics that I've really enjoyed and that had really resonated with me like throughout the whole reading experience. So I would call it maybe must read is a little strong, but like a probably should read. So I think,
I took a much different approach to this question. What are 5 books that you think people must read? I think with fiction, I think fiction, it plays an important role in society and changing society and maybe helping shift perspectives. But at the end of the day, I don't know that it can. Sometimes it just can't beat nonfiction in terms of like, you need to know this fucking happened. And so I took this list less of like, here's books that I found impactful, and more like, if you live in America, you need to know about this shit.
Okay.
And so my entire list is nonfiction.
Awesome.
Yeah. Which historically I'm a big nonfiction reader. Bury My Heart at Wounded Knee by Dee Brown.
Okay.
Which is basically just there's some narrative to it, but it's a catalog of basically all the shitty things we did to indigenous Americans from the time we got here up until Dee Brown's, wrote the book.
Yeah.
Which essentially was barter in bad faith.
Yep.
Try to teach indigenous peoples the what contracts are, knowing that we were just gonna not hold up our end of the deal on them. Constantly shifting people off of land we wanted, and then when we found that the land we put them on also had resources we wanted, shifting them off of that again.
Yeah.
It's a depressing book. It's well written, well researched, well respected. Unfortunate that it was written by a white dude, but at the time there was no one else. A Native American could not have written that book and had people give a shit, basically. Yeah, and I really think that, I hate the whataboutism that always comes along with this conversation of like, well, they were killing each other before we got here, and it's like, okay, do you remember when you were in preschool and your preschool teacher said, hey, little Tommy, 2 wrongs don't make a right? If we have this idea of like American exceptionalism and blah, 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 and this air of superiority, then like we should have been better.
Yeah.
I understand that in the context of the time, what happened wasn't necessarily particularly unheard of or considered any more vile or whatever than anything else. However, I do think it is important to know about, because it really did set the stage for how we treated anyone that we didn't like for the next 200 years, basically. So, yeah. All right. What's next on your list, buddy?
Well, we're obviously going to have very drastically different lists. I think
you have only fiction, it looks like.
Yes, I do.
Okay.
I honestly don't remember the last time I read a nonfiction book. It's probably only been like a couple of years.
Well, you did a nonfiction audiobook recently.
That's true.
The CIA one, right?
Yeah, the Jakarta Method.
Cool.
Which is also pretty depressing and kind of lets you in behind the curtain on how awful America is.
Yeah.
I think probably from a cultural understanding, your list will probably be a much more must read than mine. As I joked with you when the other day when I was like making my list, I was like, I feel like a real douchey lit bro putting this together. So I guess this will be the must reads if you want to be a douchey lit bro. Minus a few that I haven't read yet, like Moby Dick and Ulysses, kind of the meme big books. For my next one, I pulled out your copy of Blood Meridian.
Oh, yeah, sure.
By Cormac McCarthy.
And my copy of Crime and Punishment, right?
That too as well. Yeah. That's your copy of CMP is much nicer than mine.
Yeah.
I kind of had just written like Cormac McCarthy in general. I don't know if it needs to be Blood Meridian. I think most people look at that as like his greatest work. And I think it's It's probably going to be the most studied. I think it's going to have a lot of the big ideas that he targets over his body of work. But I think as an American author, he is, up until recently, he was the greatest American or living American author. I think he probably will go down as one of, if not the best.
My impression of Cormac McCarthy and what I appreciate about him is I feel like he wrote books that were a good balancing act between like, I want to read something, I want to write something that people want to read.
Right.
And still not just be like throwaway fiction.
Right. Yeah. And I think, there's a lot in Blood Meridian. You haven't read it yet.
I have
correct?
not read Blood Meridian, no.
There's a lot in there about how violent the American frontier was.
Yeah.
Or maybe, I don't know if frontiers, but like they were hunting Indians.
Right.
Or Native Americans, excuse me, throughout the whole book. Like that's the plot of the book,
right?
Is them trying to hunt down and kill Native Americans,
right?
And
which is based in reality,
right? And it's not
and dovetails well after Bury My Heart at Wounded Knee.
And it's based on this. It's both because of the writing style and the subject matter. It's not an easy read, but I think it's important. And I don't think there are certainly other works of fiction that would kind of cover similar topics and ideas. Mm-hmm. But kind of like you were talking about with like YA novels earlier, like I don't want to say they're going to use the kid gloves, but I don't know if there are that many others that are going to be like in your face, as much in your face.
I've heard Blood Meridian is very violent.
It is.
Yeah.
His work as a whole is very violent.
Yeah.
But I don't think like you're not going to run into stylistically an easier book.
Right.
That's also going to be as upfront as like, this is how horrible we were.
Yeah.
So I think is part of, cultural understanding from the lens of fiction. Mm-hmm. Cormac McCarthy is going to be a very important one.
Yeah.
So...
Well, that we're going to keep this theme going because the next book on my list is In the Spirit of Crazy Horse by Peter Mathiasson. If you aren't familiar with it, it is essentially, it's a big book. It's a very, very big book. I'll have to drop in a clip of it because I have it on the shelf over there. But it's basically about Leonard Peltier and how he ended up in prison. So Leonard Peltier is a person of indigenous descent. He's been imprisoned since the 70s. He's still in prison today. Almost every presidency, there's been a push to get the president to pardon him. And he's basically serving life in prison for shooting and killing an FBI agent, which on its surface, you're like, well, yeah, like, of course you'd go to prison for that. But it's not that simple.
Of course not.
And I think when I don't want to speak for anyone else, but when I came up through the school system I went through, which was a public school system through middle school and then a college preparatory school for high school, and I did go to college. In my education, the way that Native Americans culture and what happened is pitched to you is kind of like, well, we did do some bad things, but it was a long time ago. And then we had Thanksgiving and now we all love each other. And now they're on their reservations and that's where they want to be. And that's clearly not true. Yeah. They don't want to be on the reservations. The reservations are not their original lands where they typically occupied space. And they were supposed to have a lot more, to be a lot more sovereign than they are.
Yeah.
They do have their own police structure and infrastructure and things like that. But basically, this book does a great job of showing how your tax dollars as an American went to funding the harassment and potentially even killing, in some instances, of the Native American peoples of America in modern day. Like this happened in the 70s. You know what I mean? This wasn't like Christopher Columbus, 1492, like this was happening when my dad was in his 20s, so it's super modern. And if you know somebody that served in Vietnam or was in the prime years of their life during that era, like, well, guess what? Like, somebody that was living through this actually happening, and it's just so freaking disgusting, disheartening. And I do think it's important that people know this stuff happened because it will inform how you vote. It'll change your perception about some of these systems of control or government organizations, which, yes, I don't want to paint with a broad brush and say they're completely corrupt or serve no purpose, but could certainly be their duties could be performed in a much more ethical manner, to put it mildly.
To say the least, yeah.
So anyway, kicking it back to you, Andy.
I'm going to kind of piggyback off of what I said about Cormac McCarthy and how, how he writes about America in general. You kind of get, a little bit more on the dark side of America through the lens of fiction. And I'm going to say, for very similar reasons, that you should read Thomas Pynchon. For a lot of the same reasons that I have discussed.
Well, I see you have Against the Day there in your must-read stack, but are you just saying Pynchon in general?
Yes.
Okay.
I actually brought that over. That's in my, really looking forward to reading.
Gotcha.
I just symmetrically wanted to even out the stacks a little bit.
I appreciate that.
Except for that wonky guy there in the middle.
Yeah.
But, I think for reasons I said in the episode we did prior to this and our first episode, just the way he peels back the layers and kind of shows or alludes to what's going on behind the scenes and talks about those systems of control, how things that on the surface are supposed to be operating in our favor really aren't, and are really working to serve the people that put those systems in place in the first place.
If anyone listening wants a good recommendation, I mean, I've read limited Pynchon, but I thought Inherent Vice was a very approachable book.
Absolutely. I have said this to a few other people who have expressed interest in reading more of his work. That's a great place to start. I think it's certainly his most accessible book.
Yeah.
And I think...
because if you read that book with your eyes closed, you would just think it was like a fun, story.
Yeah. And there's some kind of noir detective elements to it, things like that, and the private eye type stuff. So there's lots of fun things in there. It's certainly a more accessible place for him to start with his work to start. But yeah, I think just the kind of way that he kind of points out that America is not the knight in shining armor that a lot of us grew up seeing it as.
Yeah.
And I think if anyone is interested in, reading more about that kind of idea through the lens of fiction, that Pynchon is a great place to start from that. And it is unfortunate that he's an old white man, but, I think he just does it so well. And I think you need to get over it that he's an old white man. And just read his work.
I was thinking about that earlier when we were talking about our top five. So I was like, these are all white dudes.
That's kind of how I felt too. And I was just like I said, I feel like I'm a douchey lit bro putting this together.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So the third book on my must-read list is The God Delusion by Richard Dawkins, which is controversial because people are going to be like, oh, that's anti-religious. But what I would like to say about this is I appreciate organized religion for a few things. Number one, I think it's a great way for people to be part of a community. I think there are obviously some moral and ethical tenets that are widely accepted that are fine. If you read The Righteous Mind by Jonathan Haidt, he talks a lot about how religion served as like a roadmap for a number of things, including like health and safety and in the place of known sciences and stuff. And so what the book kind of disputes is the very Judeo-Christian idea of a God. And so it's not necessarily saying like there's no possible way there can't be any other higher power or being or realm. However, it just the science behind the science very clearly disproves that the earth is only 6,000 years old.
Right.
And when people say like, well, how could evolution, make something as complex as the human eye? Well, he like breaks that down for you and shows you, and with real examples of like real organisms that had variations leading up to. So I just think it's a really important book for people to gain an appreciation of biology and evolution. And I think you can read that book and still participate in some type of faith. My big problem with many religions is that people then use it to justify public policy, which I'm not okay with.
Right. Agreed.
And so I think reading a text like that will hopefully open someone's eyes to being like, okay, let's take the good parts of my faith, hang on to those, the community, maybe the moral structure for myself personally, but maybe I can leave alone everything else because, it turns out that people didn't bury fake bones in the ground to pretend like there was dinosaurs, which some people have posited. I kind of went through this like militant atheist phase in my life. And after I read that, I was like, I don't need that anymore because this is pretty much like the end of the discussion, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So,
all right. I've got another, I guess, somewhat pretentious pick. The actual specific book this time, I'm going to go with The Recognitions by William Gaddis.
Which I heard is a very difficult read.
It's challenging for sure. I think once you're accustomed to it, it can be a little bit easier to follow along. Sometimes the way Gaddis writes dialogue is a little challenging. He does not use quotation marks.
Neither does Cormac McCarthy.
Neither
does the author of the book I'm reading currently.
He uses what he does typically is he'll start anything that's like a line of dialogue with a dash.
Interesting.
So like you don't have to, like guess like, oh, this is dialogue. Sometimes it will kind of trail off after the person speaking has finished, and you kind of have to be like, is this just something they said out loud, or is it like a descriptor of the way they looked around the room as they were speaking?
Right.
So there's some interplay there. Another thing, the protagonist is not named or referred to by name.
Interesting.
Through a large part of the book. He's talked about at the beginning. He kind of comes back around at the end. But a lot of it is like the other characters of the book kind of alluding to him, or his kind of the way his presence affects the situation and things like that without him specifically being referred to. Or he's only, even if like two characters are talking about him, they're just kind of saying he, him, whatever, like they're not referring to him by name.
Interesting.
But I think it's certainly, I would say it's more approachable than most people might think it is. It is kind of one of the early predecessors to that kind of postmodern.
What year was it published?
60 something.
Maybe I can use this device that has access to all human knowledge.
Yeah.
William Gaddis, The Recognitions, was published in 1955.
Okay. So kind of right around the beginning of that post-World War II boom.
Yep.
Which, if we're going to kind of paint with broad strokes, I think you could kind of sort of call the start of modern fiction.
Yeah.
If we're going to get very general with it.
I'd agree with that.
So I think if again, this is kind of going to go against everything I said previous about reading like influential authors prior to the works you actually care about. I think Gaddis's work was so influential to the body of work that followed after him. I think it's hard to discount. Plus, it was his debut novel.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And so it came out in 55, like we discussed.
It's his most popular, isn't it?
It goes that and JR, which is another one I have on the shelf over there next to us. JR came out in 1975.
Oh, so it's quite a bit later.
In the 70s. And JR was his second book. The recognitions, like almost nobody cared about it when it came out.
Right.
JR won the National Book Award. And then everyone was like, oh, he's got this other 900-page book.
I mean, that happens a lot.
And then it became much more popular. But for like those first 20 years after it came out, it was relatively obscure and did not get a lot of attention.
Yeah, it was the same with Cormac McCarthy. Blood Meridian's considered his magnum opus, but he didn't become popular till All the Pretty Horses, which was like 7 or 8 years after the Blood Meridian.
Yeah, he wrote like 4 or 5 books before
All
the Pretty Horses. But, it's like a lot of the books I've talked about, it's funny, it's human, it's thoughtful, it's well written. The characters are really great. It's very satirical. There's a lot of kind of interesting kind of ideas on the creation of art and what it means to be an artist. So I think it's one that more people should read.
I just want to point out the absolute density of the books on the must-read list you have over there.
I know. I'm sorry, you guys.
Although I can't really... I mean, Bury My Heart at Wood and
you pick some long ones that are also like about some dark subjects.
All right, what is next on my must-read list? So this is a recent one. I just finished it, just came out, which is King, A Life by Jonathan Eig, the most recent Martin Luther King biography. Again, we're sticking with the theme of history being kind of whitewashed or dolled up. So when I thought of Martin Luther King prior, I think of one thing, the I Have a Dream speech, and you kind of just think of like, he's this guy that marched on Washington and gave this speech, and it was very popular and whatever. Well, that's just like a tiny, tiny, tiny little blip of like all the things this guy did. And not only that, but again, the insane amount of money and resources the American government funneled into trying to discredit or get rid of this dude, which there's so many actual evildoers in the world. It is so disheartening when you hear that like all this money and manpower is going to, and what's crazy to me about it is like, so there's a lot of information in the book that deals with like private conversations that J. Edgar Hoover had about Martin Luther King Jr., letters that he wrote or conversations that were recorded. And 10 years into Martin Luther King Jr. being an activist for civil rights and being an outspoken anti-violence kind of guy, they launched this program. They called it like the Messiah Project. And basically there was a few people, it was like Martin Luther King Jr., Malcolm X, a couple other people who were starting to really have like big influence in public opinion. And they basically were like, we can't have a black person having influence on people. So we need to like basically start a program where we just work to discredit these like 4 or 5 people. And at the top of the list is Martin Luther King Jr. And this is a direct quote, and his supposed philosophy of nonviolence. And it's like, what are you talking about? Yeah. Like this dude has already been in the public sphere for 10 years.
Wow.
He's been shot at. People have thrown dynamite on his front porch. He's been arrested for the most bullshit things, thrown in solitary confinement, beaten while he was in jail. And the dude never once threw a punch back, never called for violence. And it's like, it's just so unbelievable and disgusting to me. And again, people, I think of like oh, well, racism ended 200 years ago. You know, the black people were freed and everything's good. I don't know what. And if you read this book and you hear interviews and excerpts from real conversations that happened in the 50s and 60s, people are still making the same excuses today. It was like, well, they have their schools, you know, who cares about Jim Crow? Like, they have it good enough. Like, how much more do they want? And people, we still have that same conversation, right? They're like, well, there's black people that have jobs. Like, what more do these black people want? You know, it's like, just to be treated the same. Like, you know, I don't know. It's a crazy concept. But for me, it was a big eye opener on the civil rights movement because I didn't have that much knowledge of it. And it's also a great expose on how the FBI worked at that time as well. And what's crazy is there's still some wiretaps recordings that have yet to be released because they literally bugged every single hotel that he went to, and his home, his friends' homes. And so there's statutes on, you know, how long they can keep the stuff suppressed. And so 2027, there's due for like another huge batch.
Wow. Okay.
And the whole thing, the entire time, they used communism as the boogeyman.
Of course.
Oh, he's a communist. That's why we can't let him. They never came out and said we can't have a black person influencing people. They were like, he's a communist. But up until this point, so a lot of this book was written with the last wave of FBI documents that were released. And so Jonathan Ogg, the author and journalist that wrote it, the biography, he was like a lot of situations the first person to go through some of this material since it had been released. Yeah. And up until this point, there is literally no evidence to suggest that Martin Luther King Jr. was held communist beliefs or was at all involved in the Communist Party, either here in America or in Russia. So, yeah, them FBI. All right. Anyway.
All right.
Next for you.
My last pick, it is the collected fictions of Jorge Luis Borges.
Sweet.
Or, you know, you could really pick any of the short story collections in there. And I think his two most well-known ones are the Garden of Forking Paths and The Aleph and Other Stories. You see a lot of, like, Labyrinth is one where it usually contains, you know, a handful of his works. But I'm not typically a big short story guy, but something about his work, it just, you know, the amount that he crams in and just builds and develops within, you know, 4 pages and just kind of start out and then just turns the story on a dime. And, you know, it can be kind of dense and complex and a little difficult at times, but, you know, they're short enough that, you know, it's not like if you read it and you don't get it, you're going to have to go back an hour and reread a whole chunk. You know, it's 3 to 5 pages. And they read quick enough that, you know, you can get a couple read throughs and really kind of get an idea of what's going on. I just think they're the stories themselves are so interesting and complex, and he's such a talented writer that I think you should read him.
Cool. The last book on my list is The Trouble with Being Born by Emil Cioran.
Interesting.
Who is a Romanian philosopher. Was it Romanian? I think it was Romanian. And he was what people would call a nihilist or maybe a pessimist. But the book, it's basically just page after page of like thoughts, like quotes, more or less. It's not like a nonfiction like narrative. It's not fiction. There's no story. There's no characters. It's literally just like, here's like quotes from him. And I like it because it's the type of book that you can pick up and just read 2 or 3 pages and get like a ton of information and just start thinking about some of the concepts. And I'm a big fan of nihilism because for me personally, it's helped me to kind of overcome some mental hurdles and some obstacles in my life and get a better appreciation for the good things in life. A lot of people think of nihilism as this chaotic, end of times philosophy, and people who are nihilists don't believe in anything, or they're miserable, they're depressed all the time. That's couldn't be further from the truth. And there's a famous quote from him where he was like asked to come speak. I forget what the event was, but he basically said like, "Why would you want me to come? I'm just a jester." And his whole thing was like, life is so meaningless, then you might as well just like laugh and enjoy it. You know what I mean? Like basically like don't take shit too seriously.
Yeah.
But I love that the title is so controversial and like triggering for people. I think that's kind of funny.
Strong title, that's for sure.
Yes. And it's just, I think it's so far left of field for people and the way most people think. It's rips the Band-Aid off and really exposes people to a new potential way of thinking. So, and I'm not saying like everyone should be a nihilist or that's the point of the book is to like convert you to this way of thinking. But when people are like trampling each other for the latest like Tickle Me Elmo doll at Christmas time or whatever, I think having a philosophy like this really helps to put in perspective like what the fuck are we doing here?
Yeah, for sure.
So it'll split your wig basically.
All right.
So that wraps up this part 2 of our lists themed episodes. What are we doing in the next one?
Favorite books we've read recently this year or so, and some other ones we're looking forward to.
All right. So if you've been enjoying this conversation from two white dudes that aren't qualified and by any means to talk about these things, make sure to tune in for the next episode coming right up.